Hi, it's Nathan here, and I'm talking about sections 142 and 143 of the WHS regulations, which cover demolition. So the main section under the harmonized or the model regulations for demolition basically says, has a requirement for notification for demolition work that's over 6 meters. That's pretty much it, but then the states put in a bunch of regulations to cover this stuff. So the main one is licensing for structural demolition and demolition over 6 meters. And now it's one we do a lot of, and believe it or not, it's actually really vague, and we have spoken to the regulator at length and demolition companies at length, and we can't actually work out where the line is for where the license is actually required. There's situations where the license is, there's demolition jobs where the license is obviously required, and then there's demolition jobs where the license is obviously not required, but then there's a bunch where it's kind of like, So give you some examples. Demolition, if you're going into a house and doing a strip out, that's not licensed demolition, you don't need a license. There's still gonna be hazards, you're still gonna need controls in place, but you don't need a demolition license, you don't need notification, you don't need a demo plan, etc. Now you're doing a 2-story building, tearing that down, it's over 6 meters, obviously you need a license for that. But then there's a bunch of situations where it's kind of ambiguous. The way it works is generally in practice what we see is if you're just doing strip outs and light reno work, you don't need a license. Once you're doing structural, once you're doing over 6 meters, once you're using plant, like using excavators and stuff to tear down buildings, you should get the license. Once you're into that bracket where you do need a license, very, very regulated. A lot of requirements go into that. Main one is getting the license. The licensing, if you're going for the license, don't underestimate the difficulty of the licensing process. It is very difficult, including needing a safety management system aligned to the ISO standard that's been certified. So either ISO certification or signed off by an exemplar auditor. There's requirements for the supervisor for the company. There's requirements for the experience of the company and the supervisor, and that can be a particularly difficult one to get across the line because the regulator wants to see not just evidence to say, hey, we've done these jobs, here's our major project experience relating to demolition. They want records, and quite often the company won't have records. Like if you were just a supervisor for another company, you're not going to have access to all of their demo plans. And we've seen them requesting like swims and demo plans and traffic management plans and risk assessments and all this stuff, for a job 2 years ago where that wasn't even for your company, that you may have just been working on. And then the regulator just says, well, okay, sorry, we need it. And then, yeah, I won't explain how we get through that, but you can imagine what the companies have to do then to try to get their license across the line. So then if you're doing demolition plan will outline the methodology, how we're actually tearing this building down. It'll lean heavily on swims at an operational level for making sure we actually do that task safely. In terms of risks and hazards, first of all, exclusion zones, set up that whole perimeter around that demolition zone, which should be done ideally on all construction sites, but in demolition, particularly important. Disconnection of services. So the main hazard is going to be like electrical services. You start tearing stuff down and we're still connected to electricity. That's no good. Gas lines, water, not good. So disconnect. Once we're in there, structural hazards. So making sure that we have a methodology for when we start tearing this thing down, people aren't in there, people aren't putting themselves in dangerous positions. Asbestos, very, very common, whole different set of regulations that cover that for asbestos removal. Testing to make sure if it's asbestos. If it is asbestos, you need asbestos removal control plan. Bunch of stuff there. Other hazardous things like lead or other hazardous substances in the house that we're demolishing, and then things like if we're just all standard construction hazards. So are we working at heights? We need fall protection. Are we using mobile plant? There's a whole list of rules around that. Highly, highly regulated. If you're going for the demolition license, it pains me to say it, but we have failed. And we've failed that process. And now we know that what clients to actually just say no to, like, no, we're not building your safety system because you're probably not going to get this license. But yes, we gave the client a full refund, so it hurt us, but hurt them in terms of time. But yeah, it was early on. We built a full safety management system for them. They had their whole licensing approval. The safety management system was okay. We got the certified safety management system. That wasn't the problem. The client got held up on the major project history, and we tried and tried and tried, and we as a group failed, even though our part of the job went well. Don't underestimate how hard that licensing process is. The application it's like 6 or 8 pages, and it's kind of complicated, but when you start to itemize it, you go, that's not too bad. But then the regulator has the power to just make a decision or add requirements at their leisure. So it'll say, like, for the major project history, it just says in the license application that you need major project history. The regulator has the power to say what evidence they want. So they can just add and add and add more evidence, more evidence, more evidence, and that's where you can get held up on that one. But in saying that, it's a very high risk task, so that's what the regulator's tasked to do. So yeah, that's it on demolition. Best of luck if you're applying for the license. Give us a call, we can help with the system, but yeah, good luck with the rest of that. See you next time.